Hello, everyone! In today's story, we will follow an adorable little girl who, with her innocent words, managed to change the entire atmosphere of a serious courtroom. It was a day that started out tense, with a stern judge presiding over what seemed like a routine case. However, no one in that room could have predicted the impact that one little girl's honesty would have, not just on her mother, but on the judge, the audience, and everyone who witnessed what unfolded. The story centers around Leila, a hardworking single mother struggling to make ends meet, and her 6-year-old daughter, Ava. Leila was facing a daunting $200 parking ticket, a sum that seemed insurmountable given her tight financial situation. She entered the courtroom that day expecting judgment and perhaps even harsh consequences. But Ava, with her innocence and candidness, ended up turning the entire day around in the most unexpected way. Judge Mitchell, known for his strict adherence to the law, was not someone anyone expected to show leniency. Yet, something about Ava's simple request for a burger, made in the middle of a serious courtroom, managed to break through his stern exterior. What followed was a remarkable display of empathy, one that left everyone in the room with a renewed sense of hope and humanity. This story is a testament to the power of kindness, of seeing people for who they truly are, and of recognizing the struggles that often go unnoticed. It's a reminder that behind every case, every legal matter, there are real people with real challenges, and that sometimes, a little compassion can go a long way. If you enjoy heartwarming and meaningful stories like this one, don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us share more inspiring tales that remind us all of the importance of empathy and understanding. Our story begins in a tense courtroom, where every sound seemed to echo in the heavy silence, and the air was thick with anticipation. The audience, consisting of other individuals waiting for their hearings and a few curious onlookers, watched intently as Leila stood before the stern and imposing figure of Judge Mitchell. Leila was a single mother, her hands trembling slightly as she struggled to explain her situation. Her heart pounded in her chest, and her eyes reflected both exhaustion and determination. She was facing a hefty $200 parking ticket for parking in a restricted area, an amount that seemed almost insurmountable given her financial struggles. Leila had been juggling multiple jobs just to make ends meet, working long shifts at a local bakery and picking up extra hours as a waitress whenever she could. Despite her hard work, her income barely covered rent, groceries, and the necessities for her daughter, Ava. The stress of managing everything on her own had taken a toll on her, and now, standing in front of Judge Mitchell, she felt the weight of it all bearing down on her. She could barely afford the fine, and she knew that any additional financial burden would mean cutting back on essentials, maybe even skipping meals. Beside Leila stood Ava, her adorable 6-year-old daughter, clutching her mother's hand tightly. Ava was unaware of the gravity of the situation. To her, this was just another place her mom had to go. The little girl's big brown eyes scanned the room curiously, her innocent gaze contrasting sharply with the serious expressions of the adults around her. Leila had brought Ava along because she couldn't afford a babysitter, and the school had a day off. She hoped Ava's presence might soften the judge, though she wasn't sure if it would help or hurt her case. As Leila nervously tried to explain why she had parked in the restricted area, describing the chaos of her morning and how she had been desperate to get Ava's medicine from the pharmacy, the judge listened with an unreadable expression. The audience could sense her desperation. Her voice wavered, and her eyes were filled with a mixture of fear and hope. She described how all the regular parking spots had been taken, and in her panic, she had made the decision to park in the restricted area, thinking she would only be a few minutes. Those few minutes had turned into longer as the pharmacy line moved slowly, and by the time she returned, the ticket was already there. Suddenly, as Leila was in the middle of her nervous explanation, Ava, who had been quietly standing by her mother's side, blurted out in her innocent voice, "I want a burger." The words hung in the air for a moment, and everyone in the courtroom froze. There was a collective intake of breath as people exchanged puzzled glances, trying to process what had just happened. In such a solemn and serious setting, Ava's innocent outburst was both unexpected and disarming. Leila's face turned bright red with embarrassment. She glanced down at Ava, her eyes wide with a mix of shock and worry. This was the last thing she needed, an interruption that could make her seem irresponsible in the eyes of the judge. She knelt down quickly, whispering to Ava that they needed to be quiet, that this was a very important moment. But Ava, with her wide eyes and childlike honesty, simply looked back at her mother, unaware of the tension she had caused. Judge Mitchell, known for his stern demeanor and strict adherence to the law, simply raised an eyebrow. The room was silent, and for a moment, no one knew how the judge would react. Many in the audience braced themselves, expecting a reprimand or a sharp rebuke. However, there was no sign of anger on his face. Instead, the judge leaned forward slightly, his gaze shifting from Leila to Ava. His eyes softened just a bit, and he addressed the little girl directly. "Did you say you want a burger, young lady?" The judge's question, delivered in a surprisingly gentle tone, caught everyone off guard. It was completely out of character for Judge Mitchell, whose reputation for being strict and no-nonsense was well known. Ava looked up at him, her eyes widening even more, and nodded enthusiastically. "Yes, please," she said, her voice ringing clear in the otherwise silent room. Leila's heart sank. She feared that this innocent interruption would ruin her chances of getting any leniency from the judge. She quickly tried to apologize, her voice almost breaking. "I'm so sorry, Your Honor," she said, her eyes pleading. We didn't have time for breakfast this morning. It's been a hectic day." The judge held up a hand, cutting her off gently. "It's quite all right," he said, his eyes still on Ava. "Courtrooms can be a long and boring place, especially on an empty stomach." There was a hint of a smile on his face now, something that none of the regulars in his courtroom had ever seen before. The entire courtroom seemed to collectively exhale. The tension that had filled the air moments before began to dissipate, replaced by a sense of curiosity. What would the judge do next? How would he handle this unexpected situation? For the first time since entering the courtroom, Leila felt a glimmer of hope. Perhaps, just perhaps, things might turn out differently than she had feared. The judge's friendly expression not only eased Leila's anxiety but also surprised everyone present. Judge Mitchell asked Ava, "What kind of burger do you want?" His tone was completely at odds with his usual stern demeanor. Ava looked up at the judge, her eyes widening at the unexpected attention. She smiled shyly and responded, "A big one, with cheese." Her innocent enthusiasm drew a few chuckles from those in the courtroom, and even Judge Mitchell's lips curved into a small smile. He leaned back in his chair, appearing more relaxed than anyone had ever seen him. "A burger with cheese, huh?" Judge Mitchell said thoughtfully, as if he were considering Ava's request with utmost seriousness. He looked over at Leila, whose face was still flushed from embarrassment. "I can see why that might be important," he added, his voice now warm and gentle. The audience watched in awe as the judge continued to engage Ava in conversation, his stern persona slowly giving way to something far more approachable. Judge Mitchell's demeanor began to change as he listened to Ava talk about her favorite foods, her love for her mother's baking, and the little treats they sometimes enjoyed when things were going well. Each word Ava spoke seemed to peel away the layers of formality from the judge. The hardened exterior that people had come to expect from Judge Mitchell softened visibly as he took in Ava's innocence and Leila's quiet desperation. "Tell me, Ava," Judge Mitchell said, leaning forward slightly, "does your mom make good cakes at the bakery?" Ava's eyes lit up with excitement as she nodded vigorously. "The best. She makes chocolate cakes and sometimes she lets me have a piece." Ava's response brought a warmth to the courtroom that no one had anticipated. People smiled, and some exchanged glances, marveling at how the atmosphere had shifted so dramatically. The judge continued to ask Ava questions, his interest in their lives genuine. He wanted to know about Leila's work, how she managed to take care of Ava while working so many hours, and what Ava liked to do when her mom was at the bakery. Ava, with her childlike honesty, answered every question with enthusiasm, oblivious to the fact that she was speaking in a courtroom to a judge who had been feared by many. Leila stood silently beside her daughter, her eyes welling with tears. She could hardly believe what was happening. This was the same judge she had feared, the one she had expected to show no leniency. And yet, here he was, showing genuine interest in her life, in her struggles, and in her little girl's innocent desires. She felt a mixture of relief and gratitude as she watched Ava and Judge Mitchell interact. The audience, too, was captivated. It was rare to see such a moment of humanity in a place usually reserved for stern judgments and harsh consequences. The judge's questions were no longer about the parking ticket, they were about understanding the person standing before him. He was seeing Leila not just as someone who had broken a rule, but as a mother doing her best under difficult circumstances. Judge Mitchell's transformation was apparent to everyone in the room. His stern facade had crumbled, replaced by a man who seemed to genuinely care. He looked at Leila, then back at Ava, and said, "It must be hard for your mom to work so much and still take care of you. You know, Ava, not all heroes wear capes. Some of them wear aprons and bake cakes. Ava giggled at the thought, and Leila's heart swelled with emotion. It was a powerful moment, one that no one in the courtroom would soon forget. Judge Mitchell had shown that beneath his stern exterior was a person capable of great empathy. He had allowed himself to be touched by the honesty of a child and the resilience of a mother. The atmosphere in the courtroom had shifted from one of tension to one of warmth, understanding, and connection. For the first time, Leila felt that she wasn't alone in her struggles. She felt seen, heard, and, most importantly, understood. Judge Mitchell took a deep breath and leaned back in his chair. "Well, Ava," he said, "maybe we can figure something out about that burger." His eyes met Leila's, and in that glance, she saw something she hadn't expected: compassion. It was then that Leila realized that this day might not end as she had feared. Perhaps, instead of being punished, she would be given a chance for her and Ava to move forward without the burden of a fine that she simply could not afford. As Ava stepped forward to answer, Judge Mitchell began to show empathy for Leila and Ava's situation. He asked Ava more about their lives, and Ava happily explained how her mother worked hard at a bakery, taking on night shifts and managing all the household responsibilities. The audience, initially seeing Leila as just someone breaking parking rules, now saw her as a struggling mother trying to provide for her family. Judge Mitchell did something that had never happened before in his courtroom. He invited Ava up to the bench and asked her to talk more about the burgers she wanted. Ava excitedly approached, lifting the heavy atmosphere of the room. As Ava made her way to the judge's bench, the entire courtroom watched in stunned silence. There was a sense of disbelief among those present. No one had ever seen Judge Mitchell behave this way. He was known for being stern, for his strict adherence to the rules, and for rarely showing any signs of leniency. But here he was, smiling gently at a little girl and inviting her to share her thoughts. The change in demeanor was so unexpected that it left many people speechless. Ava climbed onto the small platform in front of the judge's bench, her eyes wide with curiosity. Judge Mitchell leaned forward, his stern face softening as he looked at her. "So, Ava," he began, "tell me, what kind of burgers do you like the most?" His voice, which was usually commanding, was now filled with warmth and genuine interest. Ava beamed, her nervousness evaporating in the presence of the kind judge. "I like the ones with lots of cheese and pickles," she said confidently, her voice carrying through the otherwise silent courtroom. A few people chuckled softly, and even Judge Mitchell's lips twitched into a smile. He nodded, as if considering her answer seriously. "That sounds delicious," Judge Mitchell replied. He glanced at Leila, who stood by, her eyes filled with a mixture of disbelief and emotion. She couldn't believe what was happening. This was the same judge she had feared, a judge known for his unyielding attitude. And yet, here he was, having a light-hearted conversation with her daughter. "Ava," the judge continued, "do you think your mom works hard?" Ava nodded vigorously. "Yes. She works all the time, and she makes the best cakes too," she exclaimed. Judge Mitchell's expression softened even further. He looked at Leila, and in his eyes, there was no longer the cold detachment of a judge, but rather a deep empathy and understanding. "I think your mom must be a very special person," Judge Mitchell said to Ava. He then turned his attention back to the courtroom. "It's not every day we get a reminder of what really matters," he said, his voice carrying a new tone, one of reflection. "Sometimes, we get so caught up in rules and regulations that we forget the human side of things." Judge Mitchell paused for a moment, then addressed the courtroom at large. "I believe it's important for us to remember that behind every case, there are real people, with real lives and real struggles." He looked back at Ava and smiled. "And sometimes, those people just need a little bit of kindness." After a brief recess, Judge Mitchell returned with a small paper bag. "This is for you," he said to Ava, handing her the bag. "The court can wait, but we need to take care of that rumbling tummy first." Inside the bag were sandwiches and juice boxes, thoughtfully prepared. Ava's eyes lit up with joy, and she immediately opened the bag, her face breaking into a delighted smile. Leila could not hold back her tears of gratitude. She had come into the courtroom expecting harsh judgment, fearing the worst. But instead, she had found compassion and understanding. The audience watched in awe as Ava sat on the bench, happily munching on her sandwich, while Judge Mitchell looked on with a gentle smile. This small act of kindness transformed the entire atmosphere in the courtroom. What had begun as a tense and fearful experience for Leila and Ava had turned into a moment of hope and connection. The audience could feel the shift, a sense that they were witnessing something truly special, something that transcended the usual proceedings of the courtroom. It was a reminder that, at the end of the day, everyone, whether a judge, a mother, or a child, was human, deserving of kindness and empathy. For Leila, this was more than just a kind gesture. It was a lifeline, a sign that perhaps things could get better, that there were still people who cared. She looked at Judge Mitchell, her eyes filled with gratitude, and for the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to feel hopeful about the future. The atmosphere in the courtroom had shifted entirely. It was no longer the stern environment it had been moments before. Judge Mitchell took another look at Leila's file and found that she had a spotless record, with no prior offenses in nearly 9 years. He paused, taking a deep breath as he carefully considered all the information before him. The judge's face became thoughtful as he weighed the facts. He could see how hard Leila had been trying to make ends meet, her dedication to her daughter evident in every word she spoke and in every action she took. He looked up from the file, his gaze resting on Leila and Ava. The sight of the little girl, now contentedly eating her sandwich, brought a small smile to his face. It was clear that Leila was not just a person who had made a mistake. She was a mother who was doing everything she could for her child despite the challenges she faced. Judge Mitchell leaned forward, his eyes meeting Leila's. "Mrs. Leila," he began, his voice steady but noticeably softer, "I can see that you are a hard-working mother, trying your best under difficult circumstances. I understand that sometimes life throws unexpected challenges our way, and we have to make difficult choices." He paused, allowing his words to sink in. The audience watched with rapt attention, many of them moved by the judge's empathetic tone. Judge Mitchell continued, "The law is here to ensure order, but it is also here to serve the people. In your case, I see no malicious intent, only a mother trying to care for her child." Leila's eyes welled up with tears as she listened. She had expected judgment, perhaps even harsh words, but instead, she was hearing understanding and compassion. Judge Mitchell glanced back down at the file, then back at Leila. "I have reviewed your case thoroughly," he said, "and considering your spotless record and the circumstances that led to this violation, I believe that enforcing this fine would only serve to make your life more difficult, without any real benefit to society." He took a deep breath before announcing his decision. "Therefore, I am dismissing this ticket. You will not be required to pay the fine." The courtroom erupted in applause, a rare occurrence in such a setting. Leila brought her hands to her face, her tears now flowing freely. She could hardly believe what she was hearing. Ava, unaware of the full implications, clapped her hands in delight, her smile infectious. Judge Mitchell raised his hand to quiet the room. "However," he added, "I want to do more than just dismiss this ticket. Mrs. Leila, I understand that being a single mother is incredibly challenging. To that end, I have compiled a list of local resources that may be of help to you." He handed a sheet of paper to the bailiff, who brought it over to Leila. These include job training programs, childcare services, and even an opportunity to pursue an online degree free of charge. "I hope you will take advantage of these opportunities." Leila looked at the paper, her hands trembling. The list represented more than just resources. It was a chance for a better future, a chance to break free from the cycle of struggle she had been caught in. She looked up at Judge Mitchell, her voice breaking as she whispered, "Thank you, Your Honor. I don't know how to express my gratitude." Judge Mitchell gave her a gentle nod. "No thanks necessary, Mrs. Leila. Sometimes, all we need is a little help to get back on our feet." He looked around the courtroom, his gaze falling on the audience. Let today be a reminder to us all that while the law is meant to uphold justice, true justice is also about compassion and understanding. The room fell silent, the weight of his words settling over everyone present. It was a moment that none of them would forget, a moment where the law and humanity intersected, and a little girl's innocent plea had led to an act of kindness that would change her mother's life. Leila left the courtroom that day not just with a dismissed ticket, but with hope, a hope for a better future for herself and Ava. This story was about far more than just dismissing a parking ticket. It was about giving hope to Leila and Ava, and about the power of empathy in changing lives. Leila left the courtroom that day with more than just a sense of relief. She left with a renewed sense of possibility, a belief that maybe, just maybe, things could get better for her and Ava. She decided to embrace the opportunity Judge Mitchell had provided, enrolling in the online degree program and making use of the childcare and job training resources offered to her. For Leila, this was the first step toward breaking the cycle of struggle she had been caught in for so long. The impact of Judge Mitchell's decision reached beyond the courtroom. Word of what had transpired spread throughout the community, and many were moved by the judge's compassion. People began to see Judge Mitchell in a new light, not just as a strict enforcer of the law, but as someone who understood the human side of justice. His actions showed that the law is not just a set of rules to follow blindly, but a tool that can be used to create positive change when applied with wisdom and understanding. For Leila, the road ahead was still challenging. There were still bills to pay, and there were still difficult days where exhaustion threatened to overwhelm her. But now, she had something she hadn't had in a long time: hope. The online degree program gave her a chance to build a better future for herself and Ava, to pursue a career that could provide stability and security. The support services for single mothers helped to alleviate some of the burdens she had been carrying alone for so long. Little by little, Leila began to see a path forward, one that was not defined by constant struggle but by opportunity and growth. Ava, too, felt the impact of that day in the courtroom. Though she may not have fully understood the gravity of what had happened, she knew that her mother was happier, that there was more laughter at home, and that there was a sense of hopefulness that hadn't been there before. Ava continued to talk about her encounter with Judge Mitchell, often telling her friends about the nice judge who gave her a sandwich and made her mom smile. For Ava, that day was a reminder that the world could be kind, that people could be understanding, and that even grown-ups could make things better with a simple act of compassion. Judge Mitchell also underwent a transformation. The encounter with Leila and Ava awakened something within him, a sense of empathy that had been buried under years of strict adherence to the rules. He realized that his role as a judge was not just to uphold the law, but to ensure that justice served the people, especially those who were vulnerable. The law, he understood, should be a means to protect and uplift, not just to punish. The experience with Leila and Ava led him to approach future cases with a renewed sense of humanity, seeking not only to enforce the law but also to understand the people behind each case. The audience in the courtroom that day left with a story they would tell for years. They had witnessed something extraordinary, a moment where the rigidity of the law gave way to compassion, where the vulnerability of a mother and the innocence of a child had the power to touch even the sternest of hearts. Many of them found themselves reflecting on their own lives, considering how they could extend kindness to those around them. The story of Leila, Ava, and Judge Mitchell became a symbol of hope within the community, a reminder that empathy and understanding can truly make a difference. The lesson here is simple yet profound. Sometimes, the smallest acts of kindness can have the greatest impact. A child's innocent plea for a burger led to a chain of events that transformed not only the lives of Leila and Ava but also the heart of a judge and the perspective of an entire community. It reminds us that everyone, regardless of their position, has the power to make a positive change in someone else's life. Whether it's offering a helping hand, taking the time to listen, or simply showing a bit of understanding, these actions can ripple outwards, creating change far beyond what we might expect. If you enjoyed this story, please like and subscribe for more meaningful stories like this one. Let's spread kindness and compassion wherever we go, and remember that even in the most challenging situations, a bit of understanding can change everything. So, what is the lesson here? Sometimes, simple acts of kindness and empathy can create profound changes. This story reminds us that even in the most challenging situations, a bit of understanding and compassion can transform someone else's life.